Burton is one of Hollywood's most intriguing directors. His movies range from blockbusters such as Batman to animated films, as well as modern fables such as Edward Scissorhands and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And his current film, the musical thriller Sweeney Todd, shot here at Pinewood Studios.
In here is where we got some of our Fleet Street sets being built. Nice, grungy, you know, horror movie-like atmosphere. Quite exciting, yeah.
Burton's been making films for over 20 years and was honoured with the Golden Lion for Lifetime Achievement at the Venice Film Festival. But even though he's one of the most successful mainstream directors working today, he still makes highly personal films, always driven by his empathy with the outsider and fueled by his extraordinary imagination.
Incredible vision and purpose, and he follows what what's in his mind.
There's a lot of directors doing dark stuff and fantasy stuff and everything that you could say genre-wise that Tim does, but Tim does it his own way. You know it's a Tim Burton film.
He's managed to be mainstream without compromising himself, which is a director's dream, and any artist's dream, really.
Tim is full of surprises. That's what I love about him. A little bit like Hitchcock. You never quite know what's going to happen next.
Is he outside or is he just not inside? I don't know. It's difficult to say. I don't think he'll ever be inside, let's say. I think that's for sure. He's one of less than a handful who is capable of art in cinema.
People would say, that's a Tim Burton film. And what do you think they would mean when they said that's a Tim Burton film by the look of it?
Well, I've heard it spoken several different ways, sort of positively and sort of not so positively. So, when I first started, I never really had any feeling about that. And I don't actually try to think about that too much because I sort of feel like I don't want to become a thing. You know, there's that sort of thing that happens, I think, in Hollywood where you sort of become a commodity as opposed to an individual, and I've always sort of fought against that. But I don't think too much about it just because it makes me feel a bit uncomfortable, actually.
Yeah, I can imagine that. It's like the word Gothic, people throw it around, don't they?
Well, yeah, and I mean, it's got so many different meanings. It's the same thing about, a fairy tale. It's like, well, there's in some people's mind, it's a very light story for children, and other people, it's just incredibly dark, almost horror stories. Things, for me, have always had different meanings. Same with the word normal. It's like it's such a disturbing word, They just throw, you're not normal, or you are normal, and it's such a... meanings of words have sometimes complete opposite meanings for me.
He has got an absolute distinctive style, and there's certain that is so inimitably him, and practically every frame of his film is his signature. And there's certain motifs, I mean, just off the top of my head, they're like, stripes, mostly black and white, curlicues, Johnny Depp, There's certain things that repeat itself, certain things that come through and repeat themselves, and also it's just his sense of humor and his perspective on life.
There's something deeply poetic about Tim, and there's something deeply poetic about the images that he creates, that he conjures, and that he gives to us as viewers.
Tim Burton grew up in California in the suburb of Burbank, just outside Los Angeles. It's a place which he describes as anywhere USA, and yet his childhood experiences there have directly inspired his creative vision.
The sort of culture that I grew up in sort of this sort of suburban California, and I'm sure it happens all over the world, but it felt particularly strong to me. You know, you go to school and, you know, this person's good at sports, this person's good, you know, the sense of categorization happened very, very early on, and I just always felt it sort of undermined people's individuality and the different sides to people that, you know, everyone has.
You think the ordinariness of the place, the Anyway USA-ness of the place, forced you to
Absolutely.
go in your own
I think
direction?
you had to go internal, and you had to go inside your own mind to kind of create that kind of excitement and fantasy that you kind of felt was lacking in the culture.
What happened at school?
I never thought of myself as a strange child. I mean, I liked monster movies, and I played in the local cemetery, but most of the kids did, you know? I mean, it wasn't like, it felt, you know, like making little Super 8 movies. It never felt strange, but yet the culture very early on categorizes you, and then you feel kind of bad about it for a while, but then it kind of, you know, well, this is the way it is. So then you get a bit liberated by that. You know, once you're sort of looked upon as strange, then there's kind of a freedom about it. You're able to kind of act, you know, a bit more eccentrically than, you know, the other kids, because they've put you in that category.
You did leave home when you were 12, went to live with your grandmother, and then you set up in a flat of your own when you were about 15 or 16.
My grandmother told me that I used to leave home even before I could walk. I don't know, so I'm not quite sure what that dynamic was. I would crawl out of the house, or was somebody who would drive away. I'd ask if I could go with them. Early on, I just sort of placed it on the fact that I didn't really get along with my parents, but that's kind of an easy sort of, most people could say that. Even before I was conscious of it, I was just responding against that kind of society. I just wanted out of it. That's why I, you know, when somebody to this day tells me to do something, my immediate flick is to say, I'm going to do the opposite of that. And I just can't get that out of my mind. Something that was there very, very early on.
When you were very small, you seem to have started sketching, thinking in terms of putting your ideas into pictures.
Yeah, I mean, because I really didn't speak very much, or so I was told from other people. Which it was true. I wasn't a really great communicator, so I just communicated through drawing or sketches.
Were you sketching stuff which has turned up later in your career?
Yes, I mean, I have a fairly limited sort of sketching style, so, you know, characters always kind of look the same, things always look a bit, you know, similar. I remember searching a little bit later on in life this image, which it felt very much me about the Scissorhands character. That's why I always loved sort of old folk tales or fairy tales, because they sort of indicated somebody's subconscious, and you're able to kind of get things out, you know, because the drawings aren't great. They're just something that was an emotional release for me.
And he's drawing all the time. He always has a pad, he always has a pen, he always has a stain in the top left-hand pocket of his shirt. It's just his way of... I have a feeling, I don't know, this might be fanciful, but that he has a direct access to his unconscious. He lets things marinate and just let his unconscious do the work, and then every so often it pops up. I love it because I'm with him, so I've got like the whole of our relationship and, you know, birth of our child, and Billy... You know, he did a great sketch of me giving birth. I've got it, actually. I'll show it to you. It's just his way of expressing himself. And often ideas start there.
It's a completely different side to him and a different part of his character that people don't really appreciate or don't really know very well. I mean, yeah, he had the Oyster Boy book, which had a lot of his sketches in. And that was, you know, that's as much Tim Burton as any movie.
This is one of the stories out of the book I did, Melancholy Death of Oyster Boy. It's called Stain Boy. Of all the superheroes, the strangest one by far doesn't have a special power or drive a fancy car. Next to Superman and Batman, I guess he must seem tame, but to me he is quite special, and Stain Boy is his name. He can't fly around tall buildings or outrun a speeding train. The only talent he seems to have is to leave a nasty stain. Sometime I know it bothers him, that he can't run or swim or fly, and because of his one ability, his dry cleaning bills sky high. These are stories for people with very short attention spans.
Tim is preparing his projects, or as they are germinating in his mind, they kind of erupt from his mind onto the page as wonderful, sublimely drawn, very simply drawn images that communicate to me and to others what his intent is. And it's really quite amazing and uncanny how he is able to imply worlds with his drawings.
What happened to you?
I'm not finished.
Oh! Put those down. Don't come any closer. Just, please. Those are your hands. Those are your hands. What happened to you? Where are your parents? Your mother? Your father?
He didn't wake up.
You have a very strong relationship as director to actor with Johnny Depp. Can you tell us what attracts you to him as an actor and why you like writing characters on him and with him?
He responds to things, I think, very much from the inside as well, and that's why I think I've enjoyed working with him, is that you know, there's something very exciting working with somebody who you know, wants to just do different things and go out there, especially with somebody who looks the way he is and people perceive him in a certain way. He's really the opposite of that.
Is there any sense in which you're working through him autobiographically?
Well, I mean, with the Scissorhands character, I would say that was more slightly autobiographical character, but I always kept a distance from that. I mean, because first of all, you know, I don't look like anything like Johnny Depp, you know, obviously. So there's a certain distance from that, you know, that's just there. When I first met him for Edward Scissorhands, he's somebody who I don't know. I just feel like I operate on a similar level in the sense that, you know, he was known at the time as sort of a teen idol, you know, and I didn't know him, but I just had this feeling like, well, he just doesn't feel like that. I bet he doesn't feel that way at all.
They were trying to label me with all these kind of, you know, very limiting handles, such as, you know, a teen heartthrob, or, you know. When I met Tim for Edward Scissorhands, it was immediately apparent to me the second I met him that he was Edward Scissorhands. The funny thing is that, you know, it was me too, you know what I mean, that character. There was something in there that's me, that's Tim, that's you, that's universal, that feeling of being outside, you know. Throughout my career, there were several films that we did together that he had to fight with studios to cast me, because they didn't want me, you know. They wanted flavor of the month, or they wanted this guy because he was popular, or because, you know, whatever. No, I'm convinced that without Tim and his taking these risks on me, I would have been discarded a long time ago by the industry.
You're taking the outsiders, the monsters, the misfits, and putting them right at the center.
Well, I think that's because that's the way a lot of people feel. I mean, like I said, I didn't feel unique in those feelings. You feel isolated and alone, but that's what that feeling is. I feel like a lot of people feel that way. You know, probably most people, actually. It's just, you know, some people suppress it more than others. That's why, you know, the most gratifying thing for me is just somebody that comes up to me on the street and just, you know, that you've made a connection with them, and something that you've done, you know, that means more to me than box office or anything. That just singular personal connection, and it just, like I said, that means more to me than almost anything.
Tim Burton began making his own movies as a child, featuring himself and a group of friends in a series of short silent films. Did you feel quite early on this is what you'd like to do? Was it as defined as that, or did that happen in your adolescence?
Yeah, it wasn't really defined that way. I felt actually quite grateful to that, because I didn't feel like I had this pressure, because this is what I want to do, and, you know, I think that can create a lot of pressure in life. So I felt quite lucky that I enjoyed it, but I enjoyed drawing, and I enjoyed other things, so I never really had that sort of hardcore formulated plan. It wasn't until later on in school when I did a couple of projects where instead of reading the book, I did a little film, and that sort of, you know, got a very good grade. I thought, oh, well, this is a great way to kind of maneuver my way through school, and, you know, this might be a great profession for me. But that didn't formulate till later on.
At 18, Burton won a scholarship to the prestigious California Institute of the Arts as part of the scheme set up by Disney Studios.
I did know of Tim Burton at Cal Arts at that time, but he was in a different grade or level than I was. I do remember the film that he did at the end of that year, which was called The Stalk of the Celery Monster. It was such an eye-opening experience for me to see that someone who was given the same tools as everybody else at the school, who were doing these much more prosaic exercises in animation, was actually doing something that was wildly entertaining. So it was very clear at the time that Tim had something special.
Impressed by Stalk of the Celery Monster, Disney offered Tim a job as an animator.
Getting the job, I was like, oh, this is great. And then about a week after that, I think I plunged into a major depression because I was just so bad at it, and I felt quite inadequate. I was really bad at drawing those kind of characters. It wasn't my style. I was very lucky that a certain animator took me under his wing and to kind of protect me from drawing horrible-looking foxes, which that was a real... And I got really depressed.
I mean, serious depression, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so, because I was sleeping. I would sleep at my desk 2 hours in the day, in the morning, at my desk, sitting straight up with the boss, and then have a 2-hour break at lunch, then sleep 2 hours in the afternoon, then get a good 10-hour sleep at night. So I think that was kind of like a depression. And I would just do strange things. I would, you know, sit under my desk, or I'd sit inside of a closet, or I got definitely stranger when I worked there.
And as soon as you found your way through, that was...
Yeah, as soon as they kind of let me, I think they got kind of afraid of me a bit. And
why was that be?
Well, because they didn't quite know what to do with me. I mean, and luckily they didn't fire me. I mean, that was the good side of it.
There was a fairly large number of disaffected young animators at the time, and I think that one of the things that we did to relieve our boredom with the process of animation at the time was we would make little movies together, and we started to realize that there was something interesting about the way Tim's drawings would kind of come to life in the maquettes and models that I would do from his drawings.
Another project that Tim and I worked on together was an experiment with stop-motion animation, for which I took Tim's designs and created puppets in three-dimensional sets.
It's basically the story of a little boy who thinks that he's Vincent Price. And it was initially a children's book, but Rick and I made it then into a film. And it comes from my childhood experiences, and as I had sort of a identification, I thought, with Vincent Price, and that I really responded to his torment and anguish and insanity.
Vincent Malloy is 7 years old. He's always polite and does what he's told. For a boy his age, he's considerate and nice. But he wants to be just like Vincent Price. He doesn't mind living with his sister, dog, and cats, though he'd rather share a home with spiders and bats. There he could reflect on the horrors he's invented and wander dark hallways of loam and torment.
And Vincent Price was a big influence. Can you tell us about that? Because he's a powerful influence, and you've described him as a very important influence.
He just had this sort of melodramatic emotion that I could identify with. It was quite cathartic for me, and I always remember saying once to a German journalist that, watching his movies saved my life, and the journalist said, "Why, were you in some sort of danger?" Very literal-minded. So it was like, no, well, yes, maybe, but not necessarily. But he did act as sort of almost a therapist in a certain way. Just watching his films, there was a release for me watching them.
Come closer. Closer. That's right. I'm Vincent Price. You'll be just as safe in this house of fear as any of the other 5 victims murdered by the bat.
When he came into your real world, that must have been fantastic.
Having that impact that he did in my life, and then, him doing Vincent, but especially Edward Scissorhands, because the story for me was so personal that it just made it really special. Because also the Edward character represented that time in my life where, didn't have really any relationships. So that was the way I was feeling, and watching his movies, it helped me so that he was it just had this amazing crossover and just made it that much more powerful for me.
I know it's a little early for Christmas, Edward, but I have a present for you.
There are powerful moments on the screen where he's having the heart attack, aren't there?
Well, I think so. Especially seeing him, but that's, again, the beauty of having people like that you always, admired being in something. I feel the emotion so much more, and then hopefully it relates to other people as well. But, I know for me it's very powerful.
Burton draws on the intimate relationship between a director and an actor who's inspired him in Ed Wood, his film about the so-called worst director in the world, played by Johnny Depp. Ed Wood is awestruck when he directs his idol, the horror actor Bela Lugosi, for the first time.
Speed! C97, take 1. Mark.
Action.
Beware. Beware. Beware of the big green dragon that sits on your doorstep. He eats little boys, puppet dog tails, and big fat snails. Beware. Take care. Beware. Wait!
Wonderful.
Yeah, they're great. I mean, this film meant a lot to me.
Ed Wood, the worst film director in the world, people called him, and you went directly for him.
Well, I mean, because I can relate to it, you know. I mean, there's a fine line between good and bad, I think, sometimes. And I mean, I remember watching them on television, and it's like they always stayed with you. And so that's an interesting point. Is like if something stays with you. I mean, you know, I remember his films more than a lot of Academy Award winners.
Were you absolutely besotted by movies when you were a kid?
Yeah, I was of that television generation. There were movies on television all the time in local cinema that was very cheap, that would show triple features.
This is Nervorama. This is a new kind of shock on the screen. How many thrills can you take? If your blood curdles easily, don't come.
Let me die. Let me die.
I love monster movies from the very, very beginning. They weren't scary. They were just, there was something about the monsters and the characters that felt very emotional, like Frankenstein or the creature from the Black Lagoon or King Kong. All those creatures had a lot of emotional weight to them, unlike the human characters. So I was like, you know, it was always very symbolic of the way I felt and the way that the culture felt at the time.
So you identified with the monsters?
Oh, absolutely. You know, most kids do. You know, but that's like, I didn't feel, you know, that felt quite normal to me.
I do know that he cast me in Sleepy Hollow because he had this great affection for the Hammer films, which of course I did so many years ago. He wanted to show that it's possible to make a film like that, which in many ways, very, very frightening film. Very frightening film indeed. He actually said to me, you know, this is, in a way, is my tribute to Hammer.
Oh my God!
Yeah, shots seem to be painted some of the times. They're quite wonderful. And the two painters you've spoken about are Van Gogh and Francis Bacon. What is it there that attracts you particularly?
I remember when I first saw the paintings in person, just the energy that was captured on the I mean, it was just electric to me. I mean, I'd never really experienced that before, especially the landscapes. That's just really amazing to me.
A very direct, visceral experience there.
Well, that's it. It's I'm always surprised by those experiences because they don't happen all the time, and those I find are quite exciting moments in life, and are moments to remember for me because that's what kind of keeps you going. It just goes directly inside of you and bypasses your, you know, short-circuited brain in some ways.
And just sort of touching one or two other points. The poems of Dr. Seuss, there's Edward Gorey, Roald Dahl. They come into the mix, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, I think Dr. Seuss was probably the first author that had a lot of impact on me. They're very funny and subversive and unique, and that's what then, a bit older, getting into Roald Dahl, I found that I enjoyed people that had a mixture of both emotion, humor, a bit of subversiveness, and a bit of darkness, all sort of mixed in there together. I felt very much in tune with that kind of mixture of elements.
Look, the Oompa Loompas. What are they doing?
Well, I believe they're going to treat us to a little song. It is quite a special occasion, of course. They haven't had a fresh audience in many a moon.
Augustus Gloop, the great bakery nincompoop. Augustus Gloop, so big and vile, so greedy, foul, and infantile. Come on, we cry, the time is right to send him shooting up the will not be harmed. Augustus Gloop will not be harmed.
I'm the master of fright and a demon of light, and I'll scare you right out of your pants. To a guy in Kentucky, I'm Mr. Unlucky, and I'm known throughout England and France. And since I am dead, I can take off my head to recite Shakespearean quotations. No animal nor man can scream like I can with the fury of my recitations.
The idea of the dead, what they might do, or what they do, what you would want them to do, what you imagine they do, is very vivid in a lot of your films.
In the culture I grew up with, death was very, people died, you didn't talk about it, you didn't, you go to a funeral, it was like going to a funeral. I mean, and then you'd experience like these other cultures where they would celebrate death, not, celebrate it in the sense of, but just basically celebrating somebody's life. And it just felt so much more passionate and real and positive to me. I remember going down to this place called Olvera Street, which, was a Hispanic area in Los Angeles, and these shops that would have these amazing things from Mexico, Day of the Dead. They were very humorous, little sculptures, like little scenes. They were like almost little movie sets with skeletons in like a beauty parlor and a pool hall or playing baseball, or just in sort of everyday things. And they were quite naive, so they kind of reminded me of the way I like to draw. Plus, they were funny and emotional, and so I started to do a little bit of research and get into that, and I found that, again, it was that things aren't what they seem.
He'll never say, here's the light side and here's the dark side, and we're playing the duality here. He'll just talk about how he feels about the movie, and we don't spend a lot of time breaking it down, analyzing it. We never get into kind of a deconstruction. Tim said right in the beginning on The Corpse Bride, he said his first concept, he says, before we had all this, he gave me the script and everything else. He said, in this world, the real world up above is going to be very gray and very somber. And even as he talked about it, I heard like they talked about the ticking clock kind of thing. But underneath, it's a party. So that's very Tim.
And when she opened her eyes, she was dead as dust. Her jewels were missing and her heart was bust. So she made a vow lying under that tree that she'd wait for her true love to come set her free. Always waiting for someone to ask for her hand. But out of the blue comes this groovy young man who vows forever to be by her side. And that's the story of our Corpse Bride.
There's something about your films that has a direct relationship with what has been a neglected tradition as far as adults has been concerned for a long time. But when you look back on European and Western culture as a whole, a massive tradition, which we call fairy stories.
Well, I've always felt that they're very important. I mean, they're the, before movies, they were the movies, I mean, that's the sort of impact they had, I feel, and that's why I think I like those kind of movies, is that there's something quite magical about being in a dark room and seeing a light come on and a story being told. And when you read some of those old things, it gives you that same kind of effect. And I think, again, growing up in a sort of a semi-bland culture, I was always looking for things to sort of anchor yourself onto the earth with, to kind of look at the mysteries of life and to look at, the abstractions that happen in life. And you certainly feel those as a child, and you certainly feel them as an adult. And so I think it's good to hang on to those.
When we're young, we take fairy stories not for granted. We take them very, very seriously. They frighten us, they thrill us, they move us, they do all. And then they're sort of beaten out of us, aren't they?
I think the energy is that it is slightly disturbing, and I think that adults start to get afraid of that for their children or whatever, and the fact is that's the whole point of it.
But they're also, fairy stories are full of things that are not what they seem, aren't they?
Well, I think, and that's, again, it's a great way of learning. I remember, I can actually remember certain feelings as a child where, you're new to the world. And so, there's this whole world going on. So how do you really learn about it? I mean, to me, those stories were the way to learn about it. For me, watching Frankenstein and seeing the angry villagers, I could relate them to like my neighbors and all. And actually, it helped me. It helped me to kind of understand that people can be good and be bad, and things aren't what they seem all the time. And I think it's the most positive way of learning about life.
Because you transfer it to what could be called much more realistic situation, like in Big Fish. You don't intellectualize this as much as feel it, but you seem to be drawing on the fairy tale power to see that realistic story through.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's probably the most realistic film I've ever done. And I think part of that had to do that it sort of came around the time where I had that kind of experience with my own father. And, when you have a death of a parent, yeah. I mean, it does sort of bring you out of your fantasy world a little bit. I mean, because I did certainly lived there for a long time, and there's nothing like that to kind of sort of make you look at life in a slightly different way. You really can't expect it until it happens. So that did feel different to me than other films I've done for that reason.
Goodbye, everybody. Farewell. Adieu.
My girl in the river.
So often your characters are sort of literally patched together. That comes out of some sort of idea or feeling.
Well, I think it's a literal symbol of just the sort of the different sides. I mean, I often feel quite chaotic and all over the place, and to me, it's a symbol that represents a certain emotional state that I can relate to.
So bits come together and
slightly falling apart, slightly held together by sometimes feeling like the thinnest of threads. You can take those kind of abstract feelings and put them into an image, and for me, it says it all that way, in an image without any words.
Yeah, and it's where masks and such come into your work as well.
Absolutely. I remember talking to Jack Nicholson and him saying, when he did the Joker, it was so liberating to have a mask because, something else comes out of you when you hide behind a mask. And that's what I think all those great horror movie actors realize, is that, by hiding behind something, you're able to have something from your subconscious come out, I mean, Johnny Depp's the same way. I like the actors that love hiding behind characters and masks because they experience something that they wouldn't experience otherwise.
It's freeing. It's just freeing. The costumes and the makeup and it's like every actor when you can improv something, you do stuff and you're on stage, and then you put the tweed coat on, or you wear the shawl or the scarf or the hat, and it just like adds that little oomph.
Things change. What do you want? The direct approach. I admire that in a man with a mask. You don't really think you'll win, do you? Things change.
Meow.
When people talk about Tim Burton's films, sometimes as a sort of criticism, they say, well, you know, they're not narrative, they haven't got proper stories, they're not proper storytelling, they don't make sense. And I think the key to his filmmaking is that it's expressionist rather than narrative driven. It's to do with the images. The meaning is in the look. The meaning is on the screen. And, you know, he once described to me the way in which he can see a film 20 times, and he can't remember the story, but he can tell you exactly what the image of the film is, what the look of the film is. And I think that's the key to his cinema.
I don't consider myself a really great, proficient film. You know, I'm not as I've read in many reviews, I'm not a great storyteller. The scripts are, and that was like a constant in every review. That can't, you know, scripts are terrible, blah 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 blah. They can't tell a story. Da 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 da. They look good, you know. Which I always found was a strange comment to make, because nothing just looks good. But whatever. But I just never felt myself as proficient. I have to really feel it, no matter how perverse or weird it is.
It's like a way of laying yourself on the line, isn't it, really? Well, you can't do much about it, can you? I mean, that's the way you do things.
I hate showing the films. I mean, you know, it's amazing. You know, it's like showing it to audiences, like, I feel like completely, like, naked and exposed, and I hate it. You know, I always wish I could be a little bit more like other people, like, you know, that, especially if a movie's successful, enjoy watching it. But I really can't. It's horrifying for me, and yet, you know, what am I doing? You know, making movies, like, you know, they cost a lot, and you know, you can't just show them to yourself. You know, it's not, you know, an expensive form of therapy, you know, for yourself here. It's to show people.
All right, you sir, how about a shave? Come and visit your good friend Sweeney. You sir, too sir, welcome to the grave. I will have vengeance. I will have salvation. Who sir? You sir? No one's in the chair. Come on, come on. Sweeney's waiting. I want you, bleeders. You sir! Anybody! Gentlemen, now don't be shy. Not one man, no, nor 10 men, nor 100 can assuage me.
He approached me, it must be 20 years ago, about doing a movie of Sweeney Todd, because he loved it. And when you have a talented artist who loves a piece of yours and wants to work on it, you know, it's only a gift. But then I never heard from him again. We had one meeting, and that was the end of it. And then it came up again, you know, 20 years later.
He gave me this CD, and he said, you know, it was a CD of Sweeney Todd, like, you know, the Broadway, you know, like Angela Lansbury stuff, and, you know, 6 years ago, gave it to me. He said, you know, give it a listen, you know, see what you think. And I kind of listened to it and thought, yeah, that's nice, it's weird, strange, but didn't really give it much thought. And then, you know, a year or two ago, get the call, you know, says, what do you think? You think you might be able to sing?
Speak to me, friend. Whisper. I'll listen. I know you've been locked out of sight all these years, like me, my friend. Well, I've come home to find you waiting. Home, and we're together.
You know, when I first saw the musical, I just was blown away because it had all the elements that I love in something, which is, it's got humor, it's got emotion, it's darkness, and it's got all those things mixed together. And there's a certain, again, catharsis to the music, and that I just find very beautiful and tragic and moving and funny all at the same time.
I think his movies reflect a Gothic sensibility, a delight in Gothic melodrama. And this, in that sense, it's right up his alley. I think, you know, this is like candy to him. And I mean, I don't mean that it will necessarily be easy for him, the way nothing is easy, but it's certainly not unknown territory for him. I think he's been in this nightmare before.
Here we are. Pop out of the oven.
What is that?
It's bruised. Have a little bruised.
Is it really good?
But it's too good, at least. Then again, they don't come in sins of the flesh, so it's pretty fresh.
Awful lot of fat.
Only where it's at.
Haven't you got poet or something like that?
No, you see, the trouble with poets is how do you know it's deceased? Try the priest. He told me really early on once, he said, oh, I don't need to be making a great big expensive feature. As long as I'm making something like a drawing or picture or anime, you know, or something. But I think he has to be making films. It's just his medium. And it's like in his every little blood platelet. And it thrills him.
The guy that I've known, you know, since back then, and, you know, that I met in that coffee shop, in that hotel in Hollywood, is the same exact guy. No changes whatsoever, other than since the birth of his son, Billy, you know, and being with Helena, and then another baby on the way and all, he is now capable of real, joy. He can smile, you know, now. Smiles were hard to come by years ago, you know.
Now you're a public figure. People tap your arm on the street and say, really like Edward Scissorhands, really love Batman. Do you find that gets in the way of leading the life that you used to lead?
It's pretty low-key, you know? It's not like, you know, Heat magazine every week kind of deal, you know? I mean, I'm quite lucky that it's just people that want to say something nice, usually. I mean, you rarely get the, you know, vegetable thrown at you, get off the streets kind of a thing, so it's always usually pretty nice. And also, I've always had this gift or curse of people leaving me alone. Something about me, I don't know, if I look like a crazy person on the street where they just kind of want to bypass you or something, and maybe we should just leave this person alone. Maybe that's because I talk to myself. I've learned that if you talk to yourself on the street, people cut you a wide path. Like you're in The Shining and you're having that imaginary argument with somebody, you know. That does it. It helps.
Thank you very much.
It's really a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you.